Let's bring Governor McCrory. Want to hear what's on his mind, but also would love to hear his analysis of Governor Newsom, because you've been the victim of bad staff work and of upset constituents. So what's your take on that? And
Well,
Happy New Year,
actually,
Governor.
actually, during hurricanes, I almost won a re-election because of the hurricane. But as a mayor and governor, I've dealt with a 100-year flood, a 100-year snowstorm, a 100-year hurricane, you name, a 100-year drought. The 100 years are going to come while you're in office, no matter where you are in the world. It's going to happen, and you better be prepared for it. And I must say, um, the politicians in California, and I'll say also the politicians in Louisiana during the tragic terrorist attack. I've never seen worse communications from elected officials. Never, in both of them. They aren't acting as a team. They're all trying to get their own sound bites in. Right now in California, the governor and the mayor and the county executive aren't meeting together. That's unheard of. That's unheard of in tragedies like this. So there's a lot of blame to go around. And communications is usually where the breakdown is. DeSantis is one of the best communicators I've ever seen. He doesn't have deer in his headlights. He acts in command. I give him a lot of credit. I do want to bring up a name, and I don't mean to be insensitive, that we all need to think of, and that's Sam Kinison. Remember the comedian Sam Kinison who says, "This is sand. Food doesn't grow in sand." Well, LA and that part of the country is a desert. And you have to anticipate when you live in a desert, you're going to have the winds come across the mountains from another desert and cause these major fire hazards. Same thing in North Carolina mountains, by the way. I live on a river in the North Carolina mountains. I knew sooner or later we're going to have a flood. I didn't know it happened this year, the 100-year flood that we had. But you have to prepare for it. But the blame game, you have to also be very careful, because we're all to blame. Some of this is common sense. For example, as in Hollywood and Malibu, people planted trees to protect their privacy. Well, trees burn, and they'll burn your house. And so there are a lot of things we as individuals can do also in preparation. You can't always depend upon the government to save you with unrealistic expectations. And I think that's what we're setting for some of these politicians, and some of it's their blame, is we're setting unrealistic politicians. If you live in Buffalo, it's going to snow. If you live in Florida, you're going to have hurricanes. If you live on the North Carolina coast, the sand moves. The mountains the same way. If you live in Oklahoma in a mobile home, you're going to have some problems. And it's a part responsibility of both government and your leaders in preparation, but also of the individual. And I don't think we're making that point enough in media or as among the leaders. It's a combo plate. And more than anything, you got to act as a team. And that's not what the governor is doing at this point in time, getting out of a black limo. So there are a lot of lessons learned here, but I don't think the media is covering it as well, explaining the big picture. And this is not new, by the way. It's been happening for centuries.
Yeah, I mean, you just made a series of points that I hadn't thought about. One, that the team in California has not been together. Now that you said it, it's like, my gosh, you're right. And two, I think going back to I think it was Jeb Bush who really made sure Florida was ready for hurricanes. Part of it was he was getting ready for re-election and stuff. But Florida has seen for the last 20 years, the Florida Republican governors very well. They're ready, as you say, the positioning and everything. So does that come from, I assume, the governor as the chief executive of the whole state with their FEMA person or whatever California calls it, your mayors? Would you be the one to say, hey, we see this, it started, let's all get together? So it would be Newsom then that's dropping the ball here.
Absolutely. I think too much emphasis has been put on the president, frankly, with some of this stuff. It's the governor that requests the federal help. It's the governor that contacts the mayors and the county commissioners and the schools and everything else. But usually you've already had that communication line in place beforehand, so everyone knows what the rules are and where the lines of authority are, even in a press conference. Before I ever did a press conference, and I brought out a crowd, and I had a very tough hurricane, Hurricane Matthew, where we had 28 people die in floods in their cars. Before I did a press conference, I made sure we had the lines of authority on who was going to say what. and who was going to answer the question, who controlled the microphone, who was in charge. And sometimes it's the mayor, sometimes it's the governor, sometimes it's the police chief during a homeland security or a tragedy. You have all that clear before you go in those microphones, and it might be right beforehand. You know, I had an emergency.
One of the things that one of the things yesterday, there was another clip that went around, Newsom engaging with Anderson Cooper, and he gets asked about the lack of water and water pressure coming to the fire hydrants, and he goes, "That's a local issue." And I mean, again, the level of continued tone deafness to literally say, you know, to your point, when I listened to the press conference yesterday of the emergency response folks and the water authority in California talking about why certain water wasn't getting to certain aspects of the Palisades, I think it was. And she's talking about, like, this is an inherent problem. And the idea that, if to your point, you know the land that's there, you know the frequency of earthquakes and things like this, fires. The idea that you were like, yeah, we've known about this, like we knew it was going to be a problem, is even more problematic.